I wanted to go to Mark's question. Mark had his hand up earlier, Mark Kuznicki, who's at the back of the room, and I know that he's organized many events online using the power of organization tools online, and I wanted to hear what one of his questions was.
Sure, and I think I might actually decide to take a little bit of a provocative role in this conversation, if I may.
Sure.
As much as I agree wholeheartedly with a lot of the principles that I think we would all say about the importance of the future of the open web, in terms of tactics and strategy, I would think that we need to have an open conversation about what our strategy is and what is the goal that we actually seek. So right now, in terms of the campaign, in terms of the CRTC, and the immediate questions that we face tend to be around traffic shaping and the relationship between the monopoly last mile providers and their third-party resellers, i.e. TechSavvy. So TechSavvy, as Rocky is the hero in this part of the story, but there's also another way of looking at this, and it's kind of like, well, TechSavvy does, how do we change that? You change that, you change everything. So I think that the skirmishes and the wars about the regulatory structures are embedded within the current system that we have. I think that it is a failure of imagination to not step outside of those structures and completely reimagine the possibilities. And that's the future that I want to build.
Mark? That was awesome. If I was to, I guess, speak as quickly as I can over this one, you said a lot. One thing that is glaring in this is, yes, the biggest problem throughout all of the discussions has been about that last mile infrastructure. When it boils down to it, we do need an overhaul on a lot of the, whether it be the CRTC from a telco or cableco perspective. There needs to be some kind of regulatory framework change in order to make that happen. That's the reality of the situation. I think there's a flavor for that at this point. The person in charge of the CRTC made mention of that on a speech just recently, where he actually identified there being a need to review. There was a broadcasting as well as a telecom comment that was made that potentially there needs to be either a marriage or a segregation of sorts between the two, so as to prevent those who provide content and those who provide access to be able to cross those boundaries that right now are very conflicting. So, yeah, there definitely is that argument right now that how are we going to make it happen? And it'll take a lot of people shouting out saying we need a change, and it won't come without that right now. And as for the reseller comment, that was bad. Not a reseller.
Did you want to speak to that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, so yay also, just like everybody said yay to what Mark said, I agree. And it is both a simple and I think a tough question how you get there. I mean, the simple thing is that we have underlined enough that we just need to get out of our old farty Canadian mentality about competition, and especially about foreign ownership, and just really open things up. And the answer to, frankly, the problem of the wires in the ground is wireless. And so, we need successful ownership of spectrum by a lot of different players, right? We don't have the same problems in countries where there's a lot more diversity in wireless ownership. We have different problems. But, I think we need to look hard at ways that you can have healthy competition. That doesn't mean a non-regulated environment, but it certainly means one that isn't stuck in kind of late 19th century ideas about how trade works. And I guess the other thing that's hard, though, and it's why I maybe disagree that the piece around last mile providers is a skirmish, is Clay Shirky made this really smart observation that kind of changed my thinking on a bunch of things in all the discussions about the future of newspapers over the last 6 months, where he said, if you look at the transition from before the printing press to the dominance and the world of the printing press, those were very different worlds. And then there was the world in between. And the world in between, that wasn't one day that switched over, right? There's a whole bunch of confusing chaos that goes on. And how you determine what that world after is A, completely undeterminable and unpredictable at the detail level. We can't plan what world we want after the internet wins, and I think it will and it should, and we're here to make sure that happens. But also, at the same time, the decisions you make do have an impact, and you can have a trajectory. And so if we want to look at like the shortest route to the most competition, and we look at backwards in history, that why Rogers and Bell have a duopoly is that when these resources were scarce and when they were monopolies, we granted them licenses. The best way to screw with the system is to take that historical grant that we gave them and say, as a right for having made all that money and, frankly, having that kind of historical precedent but still being able to make that money, you got to let other people compete. So I don't know that we'll win that one, but I don't think it's quite just a skirmish. I think it's a way to disrupt and create competition in a time where that's going to be slow in coming.
As far as a stat on that competitive level, from an internet perspective, the non-incumbents, so the non-Roger, non-Bell, they account for about 4% of the total. So there really isn't much competition other than the Rogers and Bell.
I think that answers some questions from Miss M007 and also from Dude. Thank you very much for your questions.
Okay, I'm going to take it over here to Jesse Brown
Perfect.
from Search Engine.
Thanks. A question for Steve, further to the point made earlier. I don't think that Al Jazeera was brought up as an Al Jazeera good or bad. I think it was more a question of Al Jazeera, why am I getting email from them? When I gave my email to SaveOurNet.ca. I've since put the question to Twitter and got it confirmed by a couple other people that people who signed up for SaveOurNet.ca have been getting email from this other campaign. I think there's a legitimate question there. I'm also concerned about, just speaking further to this question of tactics for those people in the room who agree that net neutrality is a good idea. Net neutrality, okay. Now Magazine, Rabble.ca, the absent Ms. Chow. Is it necessarily a good idea to align net neutrality with the far left in Canadian politics? I could see it just as easily being a right-wing free market libertarian issue. Do we need to decide one or the other? Why don't we keep net neutrality neutral and put up a big tent and everybody who cares about this can get under it? Because it seems like there's a very distinct perspective of how SaveOurNet.ca is approaching this.
Yep. In terms of the Al Jazeera question, again, it's SaveOurNet is one of a bunch of different projects from a nonprofit called the Campaign for Democratic Media. And right now, a lot of people who signed up for SaveOurNet.ca signed up to a list for general media democracy issues, and which the Al Jazeera one is one. And so what we need to do now, which is become clear, is separate out like the different issues and lists and stuff. So that's what needs to happen from here, and that's where the confusion is. So that's something that we need to do going forward, and we will. And then in terms of the different organizations broadcasting the stream and people involved, we sent invitations to all political parties, and the only people that responded were Olivia Chow, and in the case of Ottawa was Charlie Angus. And I think Charlie, I think it's because the other parties haven't really created a firm position on this yet, and they're still figuring it out. And I think part of the reason they're doing that is because Charlie Angus, for example, is getting a lot of media attention because of this. So I hope that it is going to move in that direction, but that's just where it started. And in terms of the media organizations broadcasting this, again, it was pretty much put out as far widely as we could, and these are the ones that signed up to broadcast it. And it's, I wouldn't say like the Tyee is far left by any perspective.